Fran McCaffery and the Hawkeyes performing much better than they have in the transfer portal if you compare this offseason to perhaps last offseason or the year prior. Not that Iowa's been perfect, but you think about the addition of Drew Thelwell and now Manhattan transfer Seydou Traore committing to the Hawkeyes after a visit over the weekend. Very good athleticism out of both of those guys. We're going to talk about Traore today. He was just a true freshman at Manhattan last year. So Iowa going a little bit of a different direction as it relates to building the front court or sustaining, giving some support to that front court via the transfer portal. We'll talk about the addition in just one moment. But first, I want to thank Iowa Floor Covering. They're sponsoring this channel, this platform. They've been with us for a long, long time. Please give them a call, even if it's just to tell them thanks for being a part of this show, being a part of the program. Give them a call, very simple, 515-379-7000. Tyler, Ryan, and the guys down at IFC in Bondurant, they can help you with a tile shower project, or if it's some type of flooring, maybe it's tile or even carpet, give them a call. They can get you steered in the right direction, or you can visit them online at www.iowafloorcovering.com. That's IFC, Iowa Floor Covering in Bondurant. So the news that we got earlier this afternoon, former Manhattan forward Seydou Traore. I'm going to have to work at pronouncing that correctly for a while. I think I've got it correct, although I watched the entire UConn Manhattan basketball game from last year because Manhattan, they were really bad last year in the regular season, but they did have a decent non-conference schedule that included trips on the road to take on the Kansas Jayhawks and the eventual national champions. And at the time, the reigning national champion, UConn Huskies. So I was able to watch that game back, and it was just funny listening to the FS1 commentators. At times, the play-by-play guy said Traore, and other times he said Traore. I believe it's Traore. Seydou, if you're out there and I'm wrong, I apologize. We hope to get you on the show at this point. You can clear that up. But got some good insight from watching him against the national champion Huskies. Let me give you some stats before we get into my observation, just watching him at the D1 level. And yes, Manhattan is a member of the MAAC, so certainly not a power in that conference. In fact, their head coach was a first-year guy this past year, took over following quite a stint at Hartford and some kind of a weird ending to his tenure at Hartford. But I digress. Traore was really good at Manhattan as a true freshman. Comes in from the Bronx. He's a Our Savior New American Lutheran School graduate and really flew under the radar. I couldn't find any evidence of any other offers for him at a high school. Now, maybe he had someone else interested, but sounds like Manhattan may have been all there was as it relates to D1 opportunity. I don't know if he's a late bloomer. That's sometimes an explanation as to why guys are under-recruited and then take a big jump a year or two via the transfer portal. But he was a consensus 0-star. I don't think any recruiting services had him measured at all. He was a part of that 2023 class and started everyone but one game for the Jaspers last year, 27 of their 28 contests. And as you can see on the screen, averaged 12 points, 8 boards, and over 2 assists per game. Also averaged over 1 block and over 1 steal per game. That is significant. He shot 49% from the field, 49% from 2-point range, 26% from 3. And Manhattan is so hard to judge because they were bad. Like, they were not good. You look at their KenPom ratings, their offense was almost 300 nationally. If you look at KenPom's offensive efficiency ratings, their defense was not much better. They were rough in the first year under Jim Gallagher. And certainly it's hard for some of those mid-majors and the mid-majors that don't have a storied history to try to compete, especially during rebuilding years. Almost every year is a rebuilding year, especially when you lose a guy like Seydou Traore, who's got such a high upside. But you watch Traore on tape, and again, Manhattan's not any good, so sometimes it's hard to read between the lines of just bad team offense and what he's giving to you. But he's obviously really talented, extremely athletic. I think he's got a good-looking jump shot. I know that three-point percentage is not great, but I think he's got good form. He's got a good stroke from outside. He can finish through contact. He's not a guy who's going to be posting you up a lot, right? So we've watched A guy like Laji Dembele, who was also under-recruited. Iowa took him out of high school, and he contributed last year for Iowa. Now, his per 40 numbers are nowhere near what Seydou Traore's are. Now, again, totally different level of competition once you got into conference play for Traore. Traore is an adequate passer, very athletic, as I said, great on the glass. Like, he's just got a knack for going up and getting the ball. Athleticism, being able to jump high does not hurt. He's got good length. He's listed about 6'8". Good rim protector, as I mentioned, averaged over 1 block per game for the Jaspers. I think he's going to be able to come in and play right away. Now, there is a big transition, without a doubt, going from the MAAC, where he finished on the all-freshman team, going and playing with the physicality of the Big Ten. I will say this. I looked up some of the pace of play rankings nationally, and Manhattan was not as low in that category as I would have expected. Certainly watching the UConn game, I didn't see anything that gave me any indicator that they like to get out and run. But it seems like UConn, I mean, just knowing how Dan Hurley coaches and watching them, they've got a 7+ foot guy who was really good for them this year. They don't like to play real fast, and I think that's probably part of, if you watch that game back, you're going to see some, I think, lackadaisical offense and monotonous offense out of Manhattan. And obviously they're just overpowered, and the talent gap is just ridiculous. But he performed really well, Traore did, against both Kansas and UConn. If you look at his, well, first of all, per 40 numbers, I mentioned that earlier, 15 points and over 10 rebounds. If you look at his per 40 numbers, you look at the game log for Traore during his season at Manhattan, just his second career game at Kansas. He goes on the road, scores 16 points, adds 8 rebounds. Really impressive stuff. Went 6 of 13 from the field. Did not make a 3, in fact, until his 4th game against Central Connecticut. Made 1 against UConn. But again, like the offense that they're running, from what I have seen, and you look at the numbers, they were awful last year. Manhattan just, I mean, like, offense is just going to be a total 180 from what he's going to get with Fran McCaffery. Say what you want about Fran, criticisms aside, the guy knows how to coach offense and run offense, teach that motion offense. So, I mean, he's going to love getting out and running a lot more than he ever did during his one season at Manhattan. But it's also going to offer, I think, better opportunities for him from 3. Against UConn, what I saw at times was a guy who wasn't yet real comfortable operating away from the ball, and there's not much going on. It almost felt like watching an NBA offense, but with like guys that aren't real talented. Like, yes, these are D1 players. I'm not saying they're not talented, but relative to who they're playing, they're just extremely overmatched. And so it wouldn't make sense to see a bunch of isolation offense and guys standing around along that 3-point arc. That's kind of what I saw on tape. So you're trying to kind of read between the lines. But as I mentioned, just his ability to go up and get rebounds, you can tell his athleticism is really good. He can jump out of the arena with his athleticism. So just really impressive. His interest list was really impressive. Now, how many of these schools actually offered him a scholarship? I can't tell you. But how about this for a short list? This isn't even the full list, but short list of schools who reportedly were interested in Seydou Traore: Michigan, Louisville, Boston College, Washington, Georgetown, Florida State, Syracuse, Minnesota, Oregon, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, New Mexico, Florida Atlantic, Clemson, San Diego State, and a number of others. It's a pretty extensive list. And when's the last time I was beaten out a list like that for anybody in the transfer portal? I think it's fair to say, without even looking back at the recruitment of Philip Rebracha, Ben Krikke, Bakari, Evelyn, they have not beaten the likes of that many schools. Now, we don't know if they all offered, but that's an impressive list. He visited over the weekend, obviously liked what he saw and heard. I did see he was, I'm not on Instagram. We do have an Instagram page for from the Hawkeye of the Storm, but I did see him on Instagram with Owen Freeman during a live this afternoon. He seemed very excited. He comes from very humble roots out in the Bronx. I mean, he had to work for everything he got based on the little bit of research I was able to do. He was averaging a double-double heading into the game against UConn. And at that point, I know they mentioned it during the broadcast, he was the only true freshman in the country who was averaging a double-double. And he's going to give them something they haven't had. They've done well in the transfer portal, getting guys who are productive. for a specific need. Here's a guy who fills a specific need, and I think more than one specific need, not only on the glass, but with athleticism. And, is he going to be taught the defensive fundamentals that he doesn't already have? You hope so. I understand people who question that, but his athletic gifts will help him. And Iowa doesn't really need him to post up a lot, right? So you've got Owen Freeman, who's going to be your natural 5. And Riley Mulvey is still on scholarship, the 7-footer out of New York, who has yet to come on. Iowa needs him to come on to give Owen Freeman, spell him some minutes. And then you have Dembele and Traore playing over there at the 4. And then we'll see what Peyton Sandford does with the NBA decision, etc. But I know that's a lot. I'm kind of throwing a lot at you, but those are kind of my overarching thoughts after researching this young man from New York, from the Bronx, who is 1 year into his college career. I think he'll come in and play right away and have a chance to start. Not saying he will, but have a chance to start. We'll see what Peyton Sandford does. That obviously will impact the lineup, the starting lineup and the rotation for Fran McCaffery's bunch. Appreciate you tuning in for another segment here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Please hit that like button. Support our sponsors if you want to donate to the efforts. Believe me, folks, it does help and it is much appreciated. We'll talk to you next time.